G'day golfers. Ever found yourself redirecting blame and making excuses after having an absolute shocker on a golf course? I know that I have. Range was closed, I was a little cold, didn't warm up, I hit it in those 3 old divots. Then we have the podcast for you. We focus on how to fundamentally own your swing. Strike it pure and consistently shoot in the 70s. Be it if you're a weekend hack, retired and playing daily, a school phenom or a tour professional. We present and discuss facts and physics pertaining to golf, trying to keep our ego and opinion at bay. We dispel myths such as keep your head down, bend your knees, or my all-time favourite, game improvement irons. So stop drinking that mythical Kool-Aid and have a sip of ours. I think you'll find it both inspiring and refreshing. I'm Scott Young, founder of Swing, PGA professional and ex-tour player. Welcome to Pivot the Path. G'day golfers and welcome to Pivot the Path. We hope this finds you well, starting another fantastic week of golf, work and all things pivoting the path. What a week it's been for us. It's been a very important improvement pivot point momentum for me this week. Our improvement pivot point is for the first time in over 5 years, I actually played a golf tournament, and to draw from that and the lessons I learned from that was ultimately, how do I be a better golfer? So I encourage all you golfers to really take on and embrace what it is that you can improve, and you can't know what to improve upon until you add a little bit of pressure and those weaknesses bubble to the surface. So I certainly had a couple of bubblings last week. That's going to shape my next few months. So that's our improvement pivot point, is how do we become a better athlete? How do we become a better business person? This can be applied to life. Actually take a really honest look at where your current situation is and then create a plan forward. So that's my improvement pivot point that we'll get onto a little later. Before we do that, news from the fairways. Aussie, Oscar Piastri wins another F1. Love hearing the Advance Australia Fair. So good on you in the Miami US F1 and McLaren 1 and 2. So I'd love to get into their little engineering shop as a car nut and engineer brain to see what McLaren have done this year, but fantastic, boys. And then moving on to the Corn Ferry event, Bryson Nimmer won his first Corn Ferry event tour win. Ex-Clemson golfer, fantastic Bryson, won in a playoff. Like, these guys having their playoffs in the Corn Ferry, it literally is survival of the fittest. So he won from Canuck Stuart McDonald. So well done, mate. That is fantastic. So DP Tour unfortunately didn't have a tournament last week. And then Hayden Liu won the LPGA Tour. She had 6 birdies and an eagle, smashed it for a third victory on LPGA. She's obviously playing well. And then we get to the big two, Live and PGA Tour. Bryson DeChambeau wins the Live event, the first Korean Live event, and Bryson's just starting to gear up for the US Open, so that's going to be huge. And then Scotty Scheffler just goes ballistic, 31 under to win. So again, getting back to the Masters where Rory limped over the line. I love watching a golfer just come out and smash it like Oscar did with the F1, Max Verstappen in years past. Certainly Scotty Scheffler just stood up, grabbed that trophy and said, nah, bugger you all, this is mine to win. 30 under and guys having lots of 8s and 9s. Jordan Spieth shot a tidy little 61, I believe, 62, which was fantastic. And just brilliant to see Jordan coming back in. I haven't heard, and we've spoken about Jordan a little bit. I haven't heard what's gone on with him the last couple of years. I believe he's had some injuries. I'm not sure on what that looks like. But it's great to see Scotty just stand up and say, nah, buggy, this is my tournament to win. And that's what I love watching golf for. So that was brilliant. US Open's coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's to have Wim win and then Bryson play well. And so it's just great to see these fantastic players peaking at the right time. And I'm very interested to see how Rory plays in the US Open. We had a couple of our usual suspects we follow. Mingwoo Lee didn't play, nor did Cam Young. I presume Mingwoo Lee, after his win, is maybe having a couple of weeks off to recharge ahead of the US Open, which is fantastic. And Cam Davis came tied 60th. So he's also had a win earlier in the year. So I think he can pull the stumps back and have a little bit of have a breather for a couple of weeks, which leads us to our improvement pivot point, which is very, very personal for me. So I have the honor and privilege to pre-queue for the US Open, which I didn't get through stage one. And I took that as a bit of a litmus test of where my game's at. I hadn't actually played a professional round, that is, score every single shot, for about 5 years. So it was just a way for me to work out where my game's at. And it's always interesting going into an event, what you're trying to get out of it. And everyone's got a different idea of what they're trying to get out of their golf game, professional sport, F1 race, what have you. I went into it to try and work out where my game was at and to find out where I needed to pivot the path, to see where I had to take my game, just to get an honest appraisal of what I had to work on. There is no better way to work out where your game is, lacrosse game, hockey game, soccer game, until you apply pressure, because pressure has a fantastic way of brimming to the surface any little weaknesses you may have in the game. And I certainly learned a shitload from playing in the US Open qualifier. Now, a lot went into that event. Unfortunately, because the course I was playing at was pretty tight on how many practice rounds, I couldn't see the course. And then Maddie, our new doctor of PT, said, mate, I've got you covered. Go on this app called 18 Birdies. And it's an app that you can download the golf course and you can have your phone on in real time to actually see the golf course. I rang them and said, I'm sure you've got a scorebook, like a course guide. And they said, no, we don't. I'm like, well, that's pretty frustrating. So I thought, well, bugger it, I'll make my own. So mate, massive shout out to Maddie. Thank you, ma'am. So 18 Birdies is an app, and I rang the US GA to see if this was legal and said, can I have my phone on whilst playing a USGA event? And is that legal for golf? And they said, absolutely, as long as the app's not telling you if it's 150 yards, I work in meters, I should be hitting my 7-iron. So as long as the app isn't telling you what club to hit, I could have the app on. But I went one step further and I actually downloaded the course, and I made a little scoring book here, which Maddie also said I should have double-sided to have less pieces of paper. Thank you, Maddie. We'll do next time. But what this book did was absolutely kind of revolutionize how I approach the game of golf. And so getting back to the improvement pivot point, I had many cool scenarios, the most of which was the boss, AKA Rosemary K. Young, was on the bag. Now, Rosie hasn't caddied for me since I was out on tour, which was about 17 years ago. So we had, to be honest, with 4 kids, both working full-time here, we had an awesome time for 5 hours. Actually, it was a 5.5 hour round of golf, which drained me because I usually play in 4 hours, a little less. That round of golf was the 5 hours we spent together. So the improvement pivot point that I learned from that had so many layers. And as we unpeel the layers and peel back and work out where my game's at, first and foremost, what an awesome time to spend blue skies and 65s with the love of your life, just walking around a golf course, talking shop. It was awesome. So there were many positives to take from it. It depended on what I wanted to grab from that experience and score. And to be honest, and not in a defeatist way, it was never about making the US Open. So quick recap for those who don't know. The US Open's it's the only event that any golfer who's off scratch or better can actually pre-queue for, which I think is brilliant. I always wanted to play in the British Open, being more of a British Open born kid, because we used to watch the British Open because Peter Thompson, Aussie, won it 5 times. Greg Norman won it twice. So I didn't get into the US Open until later. Now, the British Open, you need world ranking points. To get in world ranking points, you need to play world governed tournaments. So that cancels me out forever playing in the British Open. But the US Open, as a scratch player, which I've worked hard to achieve, I can pre-queue every year. So I'm always going to be a huge component of the US Open. And I hope that those parameters never change. I don't think they will. So the US Open there's regional pre-queuing spots, and I should know, but there's probably 100 of them, let's say, in the United States. Of those 100 tournaments, there's about 120 players, and 4 players get through to then go to sectionals. So now you've got 400 people from, let's call it 10,000. Of those 400 people, then they play regional events, and the regional events are met with those 400 people. I think there's about 20 regional events. And then tour players from all over the world who aren't exempt in the US Open, guys like top 50, just outside the top 50 US tour players. So you've got all these fantastic US PGA Tour players who are not exempt pre-queuing. And so if you keep it round, even par, maybe 1 or 2 under in your regional, you'll get through. Unfortunately, the course that I played at, the greens were horrific. And instead of growing the grass, they'd only scarified and cored them, I'd say about 2 weeks ago. What they should have done is let the grass grow up to get an even cover, but they decided to roll them to make them extremely hard. Now, I was hitting pitching wedge without even making a divot. The greens were so hard. But unfortunately, the core marks were still there. So if you were putting down the core, it would stay in the core line and therefore it wouldn't break. And if you're putting against the core marks, it would bounce. So kind of future just make sure the surface is a little more neutral, i.e. I'd rather play a slightly slower green, but have it more consistent than have these core marks. Anyway, and then so the sectionals, you have all these fantastic tour players coming in with the guys getting through regionals, and you've got to have about 10 under. And so because I hadn't played in years, the chances of actually logistically doing that was probably pretty slim. So I took it as a great experience just to see where my game was at. So what did we learn? Well, I learned numerous things. I had a wonderful event happen on 11. So at this stage, I went even par from about the 6th hole to about 15. So had lots of good holes. Started par, and then had a triple just by hitting it in a shot that I hadn't played the course and hit the wrong shot, lost a ball. The 11th hole was cool because it was a downhill. And as I'm looking at my book, I'm going to 11 and I'm seeing that as I'm standing on the tee looking at the book tells me that the water, so it was a reachable par 4. I hit it about 310 yards. And the green was about 340 from the tee downhill. So in theory, I could have knocked it pretty close. But the water, as you're standing on this tee, looked like it was right next to the green. So it was water on both sides and out of bounds. So the chap who was hitting up with me, Nick from Wing Foot, shout out Nick, enjoyed your company. He's playing in a tournament this week. Nick hit driver, didn't commit to it, hit it way left. And then I'm standing on this tee with my driver in my hand. Yet because I had my book, I had pre-organized how I was going to play every hole. And I had never done that 10 years on tour. And what I enjoyed about that so much was that it took the emotional stress out of a round of golf. I'd pre-planned every shot, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed that. Now, I had to adapt with if there was wind up or wind down. The one where I lost the ball, I'd pre-planned a shot that I hadn't played the hole before, and I hit the wrong shot, which was poor. But this particular event, so I'm standing on 11. My brain tells me to hit driver because that's an emotional decision. There's water that conclaves into the fairway. And as you're standing on the tee, it looks very different to actually the topographic map telling me how it is. And I had a really lovely moment. I'm like, buddy, pump the brakes, take your ego out of play, hit your 4-iron that you had pre-planned on the train ride home the night before. And that 4-iron got me just about to my 110 meter range. And remember, I play my best golf at that 100-meter shot. Now, I couldn't quite get to 100 meters from the pin, but the 4-iron took the water out of play, and it just made me have no stress. So I put my driver back in the bag, gave myself an uppercut, hit my 4-iron, middle of the fairway. Instead of having half-to-half pitching wedge, I had about 118 meters, hit that to about 10 foot, didn't make the birdie. But the point was, it reminded me that when I was playing, how many emotional, poor decisions I made for the round of golf. So one improvement pivot point that I'm going to try and do is every time I've got a pretty serious game of golf, I'm about to go to Ireland with some mates and play in Ireland. I'm going to make a course guide. Why? Because it's such an easier game to play with unemotional decisions, right? And so I took out my 4-iron. I knew that the water, which looked like it was in play, wasn't in play. So I created a beautiful swing on that. And then pitching wedge up and off I went. And then I hit a 7-iron on the next to about 6 foot, didn't hit the hole with birdie, but hit a beautiful 7-iron because once I got a couple of good shots under my belt, then momentum started to carry on. So improvement pivot point 1, create a book of what you're trying to do. Don't make emotional decisions on the day. Pivot point number 2, even though the greens were appalling, I actually didn't hit a hole inside about 7 feet. And so I know deep down, when I'm really honest, that whilst the greens were poor, I didn't align my putter well, which gets back to how we practice in here. And so I'm going to tweak how I practice in here for both myself and for our community, because even though my numbers were perfect, and I mean perfect, I know I'm putting really well, my alignment of my putter face wasn't good enough because I hadn't been working on that. I've been working so intently on controlling my stroke that I forgot what's the bloody name of the job. Let's point the putter face where you want the ball to go. And so we're going to start there today and just show you how I improve that straight away. So the practice round was on a Thursday. Friday morning, I'm in here working on my putting and where I'm aligning. I'll get to that in a sec. Another big takeaway for me, as a 50-year-old, I've dislocated both my knees a good 40 times, right? So where there's a lot of scar tissue and a shitload of arthritis. Unfortunately, because I protract my kneecaps a lot, the underneath my kneecap is like a little jellyfish, and it's rude with arthritis. Unfortunately, Thursday's round reminded me how much I just, with my longer clubs, instead of loading that right glute, I just got off that right glute. So unbeknownst to me, the boss took a lot of video, which again had an interesting point. And as Rosie took more and more video, I realized that instead of head stays still, shoulder down, load right glute, I was just getting off my right knee because it's huge. It's very, very swollen. And that's one of the things I took away from Thursday was I've got to get a little knee guard, and Maddie's organized the right one with a patella little groove. Why? Because I don't want to get a new knee. I mean, it's been told to me about 6 years ago that I need a new one. There's no damn way. So I'm just going to keep the weight off, keep working hard, keep training. Maddie's got me working far more on my quads, but I'm going to get a knee guard to play golf now, which we'll see how that goes. So that's a very practical thing. And then what it showed me was when Rosie took a lot of the video, how my pre-shot routine was better than it's ever been. And this is one of the other improvement pivot points. I keep a mental score. So this is a part of the game that I would love to work on more with my community. Unfortunately, a lot of them are fixated on the physical and they don't understand how important the mental is. So I keep a mental percentage score on how I concentrated. And I developed this myself because a lot of sports psychs said you should do this and you should do this and you should think like this, but no one ever gave me an idea of how to gauge that. So I developed a percentage of all the shots I play in a round of golf, I can work out percentagely how I concentrated for that shot. And I know that if I have a mental score of over 80% for a round of golf, I will shoot under par. Unfortunately, this one I shot 62%. My goal was to shoot 80%. So mentally, I didn't reach my goal of the Thursday. And that was one thing that I was a little frustrated in myself. But first event in 5 years, I give myself a little bit of a slack there. But I'm going to work a little bit more. If I be honest and I look at like in a third person view, bird's eye view of how I played, I stuck to every single routine apart from the 18th where I got a little pissed off. It was a 5.5 hour round of golf, which I wasn't used to. And the 18th I switched off heading into the green. But up until that chip on 18 and that little pitch shot, I was mentally on for 5.5 hours. So as I look kind of third person on my round of golf, because the event for me for the US Open wasn't about the US Open. It was the fact that as a professional golfer, I can't play in a lot of events that really put me under pressure. And I really wanted me to be under pressure to see where my game's at. We've got swing up. It's now, the business here is now starting to hum. So it was an opportunity for me to get back and play. It was the first time in over 5 years that I actually played golf on my own. This is going to sound really weird, but every time I play golf, I'm always helping someone else, which, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love. Whether it's my kids, whether it's Rosemary, whether it's my clients, whether it's my mates, I'm a guy who's always going to put someone else's game ahead of mine just because I've been doing it for 20 years, right? And it was the first time that I actually had my game in the forefront of my mind. So that was a very weird experience for me. Habits create, or momentum's created through habits. And my habit is to focus on other people. And so it was really nice to actually focus on my game. But in doing that, I realized that our business model is swing is the theoretical place to improve. It's where we get our numbers. It's where we look at ball flight. It's where we look at a feel. But you must perfect that place to practice on a golf course, because at the end of the day, playing golf is an art, and it's more feel outside. And started par, hit a shot where I lost a ball, and it kind of rattled my cage a little bit. And instead of relying on the art of hitting shots, I jumped back into the theoretical bubble a little bit, because that's what I've known for the last 15 years. And we always go to where we know. And what I should have done, and I did it on about 8, was I'm like, uppercut, come on, buddy, shoot some shots, hit some shapes, hit it through that cloud, hit a high draw, not worried about a high draws inside 10 face 2, but it's kind of starting up there and it's ending there, and it's bouncing twice before it stops 6 feet below the hole. And then I started to hit some beautiful bloody golf shots. And the chap I played with, Nick, who kind of plays every single day, I reminded, he was like, you're 50, what? And he said, when was the last time you played an event? I said, like, this is the first time in about 5 years. And he was gobsmacked that I just don't play enough golf for me. So I'm going to try and play a little more events, because I really loved putting myself under pressure and reminding myself that I've got to hit some shots. Stand back and visualize that high cut. I was in the bunker on 16 and I had about 190 meters up a hill. And I hit a 5-iron out of a bunker, little butter cut, and it was one of the best shots I've ever hit. And it was all about feel and what does it look like, rather than, there was a little bit of process, ball off back foot, trap the ball first. If I'm going to trap the ball's going to come out right. I don't want to hit the lip, but it was that feel and putting yourself under pressure and performing well. So super proud of how I played. I've got to work on being a little more visceral, a little more feely, a little more out in the moment. And then from a putting point of view, which is what we wanted to get in today, just quickly, I'm going to really double down on working where I'm actually starting my putter, because even though the greens were crap, I know that I wasn't starting the putter online, and that's ownership that I've got to take. And one thing I love about swing and what we do in here, it's very honest, right? And I could bitch and whinge at how bad the greens were. No, buddy, I didn't align the putter correctly, and therefore I didn't start the ball online. I had about 6 birdie opportunities from within 15 feet. I hit some really good shots, and I didn't hit the hole once. And so that says to me that even though they were bumpy, I got to start the ball on the target line better. I know my stroke was good because I've worked on stroke, theoretical, but at the end of the day, I've got to make sure that when I don't have all my lines in here to start the putter, I've got to create a feel of where that line is. So that's what I wanted to show you, how I'm going to change what I do in here, and let's get into it. Okay, so what I've been practicing for over 12 months now, every single day, is my stroke. But what I haven't been practicing, and I've had this laser here for the putting line, but what I haven't been practicing, and I've had this same laser in my bag for over, 20 years, is looking at where my putter face starts relative to target line. But what I haven't done, and what I didn't do on Thursday, I missed every single putt right, every single one, which suggests that I was aimed just a hair right. So I've always had my green laser here, but what I'm going to do is line up my putting laser on my putter face with where the target line is. And so I know that as I look down, I absolutely know my red laser of my putt is parallel to the green laser, and I know that my brain tells me that's shut. So as I'm looking down this morning, I know in my heart of hearts that my putter face was slightly open on Thursday, because I hit a couple of edges. I didn't hole a putt. I felt like I putted really well, but I didn't even hit some holes from 10 feet. Now the greens were bumpy, but I still should have hit the hole. So I'm going to go through my pre-shot routine. And I really love my pre-shot routine. And then from there, I'm going to feel like I keep this putter face, which to me looks dead shut. Okay, I've gone through the hole and away we go. So I now know that how my putter face looks relative to a start line is parallel, and I've got to just retrain my brain where that putter face looks relative to what I thought square was. And I think the only way to do that is with a little putting laser. So again, be objective with how you're putting. We love using blast to get the numbers right, but at the end of the day, Thursday, when pressure was applied, showed me because my putter wasn't aimed in the right spot, I didn't hole any putts. Be objective, be objective, be objective. And for Christ's sake, get out and put some pressure on your game. And that's not $50 with a mate. That's actually a golf tournament where you have to count every single putt, every single shot. And then you'll be accountable for your game because it will tell you where your flaws lie. I know I've got to work on aligning the putter face a little better. I've got to work on being a little more visual when I play golf. And I've got to just stick to Velcro on, switch on, Velcro off, switch off. And I'm going to make a book every time I play. So when I go play Bally, Ferry Point, I'm actually going to make a book so I know exactly where to hit it. Beauty golfers, look, thanks for listening. Remember, the newsletter drops Friday. Share it with your mates. And if you like the YouTube, just click on the link below. We do appreciate all your support. You can absolutely own your swing with the work you put into your game off the golf course. We'll see you next week. Cheers.